This right here is Volkswagen's new ID.Aero concept, and it's going to replace the Passat because the Passat is no more. So what we have instead is this electric sedan from Volkswagen. And now I'm going to show you the front, side, and the rear and let you know what I think of it, and then also let you know what I think about the ID lineup in general and the design languages. So they say that this car is going to have around over 300 miles of range, which is pretty optimistic. As we know, there is a lot of numbers being pulled out when you launch a new EV, but in the real world it's probably going to have the same kind of range as the ID.4. So let's have a look at the front end here. This is, as they say, a concept, but as you know, this is definitely going into production because it looks production ready, apart from details such as these cool headlights in the middle right there. We have this ID light bar, as you can see, and you can clearly tell that this is an ID car based on the graphics of the design, and that's what we've been talking about here for a long time. If you want to create EVs from scratch, so not cars that are being transformed from internal combustion into EVs, for example the Volvo XC40 Recharge and so on, you're gonna get this super duper smooth design all over the place to create a drag coefficient that is good for EVs. This has a 0.23, not as good as Mercedes. It's 0.20, but it still be pretty slippery through the air, and you can definitely see that from this design. So what this creates, though, it creates a bit of a problem when it comes to identity for car brands, because how much can you reduce from the car and how much can you allow the design to be determined by having a very good drag coefficient? That means that all EVs are pretty much going to end up looking the same, and that's where the graphic features of these cars, new EVs, become so important, because that's how you're going to set yourself apart from the competition, obviously. So I do like the front end. It looks very, very clean, and it feels like we're moving back in time to a time where design were a lot simpler. We reached a peak of overstyling with, I always take the Honda Civic Type R as an example, in the previous generation, which was just nuts when it comes to wings and styling and creases and fake air vents and outlets. But now it feels like we're dial that back, and we kind of need to do that if we want to have a good drag coefficient for these EVs. So let's have a look at the side view right here. Super clean shoulder line right here. Looks really nice, but at the same time it looks pretty, I don't know, it kind of lacks some sort of identity in my opinion. It doesn't look like we have the 3-box design of a proper sedan like we've used to seeing up until very recently, when a lot of manufacturers started doing this sporty sportback design. Audi, as you know, they had a separate design unit for this. They made the A4, the A5, and then they made the A5 Sportback. The name with the Sportback were actually the cars that had this type of design in the rear, but now it feels like every single sedan have these type of styling features to it. Looking at the rear view, same kind of feeling here like we have in the front end. It's extremely simple. Just look at these lines. We have one line going here, one line going at the bottom. We have a nice little diffuser down here. Nothing of the black graphics sticking up or something like this, like we have on the BMW i4, for example. Nothing going on. It's very very Volkswagen-ish, where every single line, every single feature on the car needs to have a specific purpose, and this is just hammering in that design philosophy of Volkswagen. I do like these taillights. I really hope they keep this for the production version because it looks cool, and as I said, graphic features super important when you have such a kind of bland looking design otherwise. Let's have a look at the lineup of the ID cars. We don't get all of these in the US. I don't even think we get the ID.5 here. I'm pretty sure we don't get the ID.5, which is the sportback version of the ID.4, which we do get here in the US. So up here we have the new ID.Aero concept. As you can see, it looks decent from the side. It's a very slippery design. I'm gonna pop in my internal combustion equivalent from Volkswagen and let you know what I think about the proportions there and which one I prefer. So looking at the ID.4, you can clearly see that we have the same design philosophy as we have in all other ID cars. We have the same kind of shoulder line going through here, and then we have this big ID.6 for the Chinese market down here, which we don't have in the US here either. But this looks almost like an internal combustion engine version. This is the ID.6 is the one that definitely looks like it could have been an internal combustion engine, looking at the proportions right here. But comparing these, I think Volkswagen is doing a great job nailing their ID identity, if you want to call it that. It just worked out like that. But they have a great design structure in a brand new segment, which is the entire EV lineup of Volkswagen. You can definitely still see that it is a Volkswagen. You can also see that it is an EV by just looking at the design language and the graphics of these cars. I really hope they keep these 22-inch wheels for the production version. I doubt they will, because, you know, concepts always have the really nice stance in their cars. It looks properly planted on the ground, and then it comes out into production. And unfortunately, a lot of them lose that kind of stance that we have in the concept cars, and that we have in, I would say, in this car as well. You can see how nicely flush the wheels sit with the wheel arches. That's exactly what I'm looking for in a properly planted car. But I don't think that's gonna carry over to production. Another thing I think they're gonna change are these illuminated door handles, which I think is really cool. But if it's gonna be a Passat replacement, it's probably not feasible to do that, because it's gonna cost a lot of money. But you can see that we have the line that goes from the front and the light bar right here. It continues into this light bar right here, and then the same line goes through the handles into this line in the rear end. I think that's a nice touch from Volkswagen. Now I want to pop in the Arteon or Arteon right here. This is what I think feels more like the internal combustion equivalent of the new ID.Aero concept. They say it's going to replace the Passat, but if we look at the proportions, I think it looks a lot more like an Arteon right here. And I love this design. I think this is a very underrated design, and people are buying crossover SUVs instead of this. It doesn't really make sense why you would buy, for example, a Tiguan instead of this beautiful sculpture right here. But I think it looks kind of similar to the new ID.Aero concept up there, and it feels like this is actually a pretty decent design. It doesn't look too bubbly when it comes to EVs. As you know, I'm not a fan of EQE, the EQS, the EQC. They definitely look like a little bean from the side. Here, at least we have some definition from the greenhouse going in to the hood right here, and this corner feels like it doesn't have this bean shape like Mercedes is going all in on. So overall, I think it's a pretty sweet looking design, very clean and very simplistic, like we're used to seeing from Volkswagen in their ID lineup. This is supposed to come to the US, I think, next year or something like that, and I really don't think they're going to change a lot in the design right here from the concept going into production. As I said, these things, as you can see, they're illuminated right here. I don't think this is going to carry over to the production car. I think they're going to ditch this as well and create some normal looking functional headlights in here instead of having just positioning lights up there. And in the rear, the only thing I wish for here is, since the taillights they don't need to be projector lights, they just need to be an indicator of tail lights, so you can stylize them more than the headlights. So I think maybe, hopefully, this pattern in the back, which is an ID pattern by now, I hope this will carry over to the production version. I think it's a good job by Volkswagen. I am a little worried though, where are we going to go from here when it comes to IV designs? As I said, I mean EV designs, obviously. As I said, it feels like we're taking away so much from the styling part of EVs. It is a fun time to live in because for designers, if they don't focus 100% on getting maximum range, because if you do that, this is what you're going to end up with, a very sleek bean looking shape with some clear graphics distinguishing the brands from each other. But I would rather see manufacturers actually focusing a little bit more on funky designs and maybe drop the range a little bit, because I think the technology is going to catch up, so we don't need to have super slippery designs on every single new EV that comes out, and instead create some cool looking designs and just have a skateboard of batteries and design whatever you want on top and maybe drop 20 miles in range. I would be all for that approach as well. Let me know what you think about the ID.Aero concept here. Are you a fan? Do you think it's a good idea to replace the Passat with this? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.